that Erie needs, and I'm very excited to introduce, at least to our listeners and to much of the community here, from the new executive director for the Erie Philharmonic, Bobby Pape. And welcome to Erie and the Phil and to Talk Erie.
Well, thank you so much. It's glad to make my debut here, Joel. Glad to be with you on this fun Friday.
Yeah.
Gorgeous day outside. We're watching people walk up and down the street, and after this, I think I ought to head straight to the beach if I can. It's just the perfect time to be in Erie, isn't it?
Fantastic. All right, let's get started. Your origin story. Where did you grow up? How did you come up, like schooling and so on?
Yeah, we'll dive into it. I do want to say one thing first.
Yes.
You mentioned I was in your teaser here at the top of the hour that I was the new head of the Phil. I don't want anyone thinking I'm replacing Daniel Meyer, the great maestro.
Right.
I would never dare to. I think Daniel and the musicians want me on stage about as little as I want to be on stage, and I'll spare Daniel sitting in the executive director's office. But he and I are great partners in this, and I'm so glad to be here with him and the whole team at the Phil and the board and the volunteers.
People need to understand that dichotomy. There's somebody that runs the front office and somebody that runs the orchestra.
And I'm honored to get to do it with him because, boy, what a partner I've landed with him here.
Wow.
And we can certainly get to that. But, yeah, let's talk the origin story. So I've been with the Erie Phil for about 7 whole weeks now that it's Friday afternoon. Glad to be settled in here. And I'm sure it's no surprise to the folks here in Erie that it's been an incredibly welcoming and warm 7 weeks so far, getting to know everybody. I keep telling folks I haven't met anyone I don't like yet. We'll see if that's still true at the end of the hour, but I think it will be.
That's awesome.
I grew up just outside of Rochester, New York, so I've traded in the shores of Lake Ontario for Lake Erie here.
Okay.
And the Great Lakes region's got a place close to my heart. I was mentioning before we went on that I also have a lot of time in Buffalo, and we'll get to that too. But I grew up in the village of Webster, New York, where life is worth living. Yeah. It's
off of the Thruway.
Sort of. It's a little north. It's right up on the shores of the lake there, and it's what I like to call a blue collar village wrapped around with a white collar town around it. And I grew up right in the village. So I'm an only child, single mother. Grew up relatively poor, but didn't know it at the time, which means good work from my mom on that one.
Neat.
And I had the blessing of a couple of great influences early on. I had a great church music program with an organ. People won't be able to. Well, the folks on Facebook will see from about this tall singing in the church choir, about 4 years old, all the way up through high school.
Wow.
And then also great music program in my suburban school district that my mother worked hard to keep me in. So I'm grateful for that.
What did you play? What was your primary instrument?
So this is always fun to share because when you tell people you work for a symphony orchestra, the first thing they ask is, what do you play? What do you play? And I always tell them, well, I played viola for about 2 months in 4th grade. And it was before the first concert where the orchestra teacher and I had a come to Jesus moment, and we said, why don't you head back over to the chorus, young man?
Oh my God!
Now this was mutual. I couldn't hack it. Maybe it's because I was left-handed, and so everything felt backwards to me. I don't know. But I came up through the chorus, and I never had ambitions of being on stage. I never thought I was going to be some star soloist, but I loved being around these incredible musicians. And Webster's just outside of Rochester, so all of my incredibly talented friends are studying with these Eastman faculty.
I was going to say that it's like the center of the universe for music in a lot of ways.
So if anyone knows Rochester, there's this great little coffee shop right next to the Eastman Theater called Java's, and when we were teenagers with just enough money and just enough cars to cause trouble, we'd go hang out at Java's and drink coffee and shoot pool. And we thought we were going to take over the world from there. And all my talented friends would be in bands and be doing all these gigs. And I would be standing there saying, well, do you need a poster? Do you need someone to take tickets at the door? Do you need someone to reconcile the cash box at the end of the night and sell merch? And that's how I started to realize that, by middle school, I was taking attendance in chorus. Boy, I was a brown noser back then. And I quickly found that my place was off stage. So I got to college. I went to the University of Buffalo, that whole hour away from Rochester and, trading into Lake Erie. And I studied the music department. I studied theory and composition a little bit, but really I just wanted to be around the talent. And very quickly became a work study student in that department for a choral conductor. And that went from working with the chorus to, get music ready for concerts to doing postcards and press releases for his professional group in New York. And from there, I realized that there was a career here. So I was managing coffee shops at night to pay for school by day. And one day I just realized I should be doing this to make my money, not just to be on the side. So it's actually a really fun story. It was sophomore year of college. I'm sitting in my dorm room. It's late at night. I think the statute of limitations has expired on this, so I'll say I may not have been 100% sober. And I thought to myself, I got to stop coming home smelling like coffee and burnt milk, which is what happens when you work at a coffee shop. So I sent an email in the middle of the night to the then marketing director of the Buffalo Philharmonic, a great guy named Steve Baker. We're still friends. I didn't know him. I didn't know him from Adam, and I didn't play anything. And I didn't really, I knew a bit about orchestras, but again, I didn't play anything, and I didn't participate in that way. But I just reached out and I said, look, I'm a writer, because I was also studying in the English department.
Okay.
And I had dreams of being a journalist. And I said, look, I can write. I'm organized. If you can use me, would you let me know? It's like a Tuesday night, middle of the night. Don't I get an email back about 20 minutes later? Of course, I'm sitting at my desktop computer in my dorm room. It's 2005 or 6, something like that. And Steve writes back and he says, I'm awake right now drafting a press release, and I really shouldn't be. Coming on Friday. Sure enough, I came in on Friday. I like to tell people I was wearing the one suit I owned, which came from a thrift store, and it sort of fit. And I walk in, he's in jeans and a Hawaiian shirt. And I was like, oh, okay, good. These are my people. I like this. He hired me on the spot. I think I negotiated up to $10 an hour. Wow. And I would come in, 10, 15 hours a week. I had a flexible schedule with classes, so I'd come in a few afternoons, a couple mornings, and then the weekends. And I would, write pressers. I would print and cut inserts for the program book. And then I just started inserting myself into every meeting I could. I'd get myself into every committee I could. I'd show up at every concert. I had a badge, so they'd let me backstage. We were talking before we got started here about the Buffalo Phil, which really holds a piece of my heart. They've got this gorgeous concert hall, the Saarinen Design Concert Hall, and I would find every secret passageway to get backstage.
Sweet.
And get to know the musicians and get to know their great music director, Joanne Folletta. And I just really realized I had sort of found my people. And I discovered that there's a few different ways that people end up in arts administration. There are musicians who realize that the gig life is exhausting. It's not quite for them, or maybe their musical talent doesn't quite match their ambition, and they realize they can do it on the admin side. And then there's folks like me who just do it for the fame and the money. So, I sort of applied my skills to that. I worked there part-time for a few years, for about a year and a half.
Yeah.
Just soaked up every minute of it and was making just enough money to survive. And so that was great. I bounced around, did a couple of other things after that because I was working my way through school.
So the UB degree was in what?
Well, so I ended up studying English journalism. They don't have an arts administration program there. And for a while, I thought I was going to be one of those kids who built his own degree and I was going to go onto that track. But at the end of the day, I realized in arts admin, you can do that. And that can be a really good path for some folks. But you can also just sort of apprentice your way through
I was going to say, English journalism's perfectly designed for this.
Well, the skills overlap with so many of the things you have to be good at. And even now, I'll often mentor young staffers or interns or even more importantly, composers and musicians who are training or in conservatory. And I always tell them the biggest thing that's missing from their education is how to interact with other humans. Like you can be really good at playing trombone, but if you don't know how to send an email where your bio is not in a PDF because someone like me has to put it into a program book in a hurry and doesn't want to have to retype it or figure out a way to mine it out of there. Those are some of those basic business skills that you have to have when you're entrepreneurial as a musician or a composer. And so I spent
you could teach seminars all
done
day
it.
long.
I've done it with composers and
wow.
I've got a good colleague back in Boston, one of my best friends. We've talked about just kind of hopping from conservatory to conservatory and doing weekend courses. But
well, it's similar to like trying to teach a baseball player, how to do the 30-second sound clip after the game.
Yeah, doing media training.
I'm just happy to be here. Contribute to the team.
Now, of course, I don't want them to get too good at that because then I'm out of work.
Right.
So I went to university. I worked at a law firm for about a year as a paralegal. And then was still bouncing around a little bit, and I just desperately wanted to get back into the nonprofit space. So I ended up at our great friends at WNED, the Buffalo Toronto Public Radio and Television Station, for a quick 6 months in their education department as an assistant. And then after that, I was off to the races. I went back to the Buffalo Phil, this time in a fundraising capacity. I went in and sort of bounced my way through all the fundraising jobs in about a year and a half. They were going through some transition while I was there, and so I had a chance to do kind of everything. I met my now wife while I was working there. And when I met her, she was training in a medical field. And she had told me, she warned me when we started going out, I'm moving in about a year here. I've got a job lined up in Boston, which is where she's from. Actually, her job was lined up in Providence. And she said, so just know this can't be serious for long because I'm leaving in a year. And after about 6 months, I started thinking, boy, it's getting serious. And we decided that we'd go together. So we moved to Providence, and I ended up taking a job in Boston with a great chorus and orchestra up there called Cantata Singers. I was their director of development. Did that for a little over a year. And then a new music ensemble, a professional group called Boston Music Aviva came calling. I knew them. I had started following them before I moved to Boston. They were looking for an executive director, and it was a scrappy shop, a little $500,000 a year operation, all contemporary music. So stuff you've never heard from people you've never heard of. And I ran that group with a great music director for about, depending on how you count the beginning of COVID, about 8 to 10 years. It felt like 100 at the end. And we did about 8 seasons of new commissions. So bringing, one or more new works on every concert into the world, and then doing a lot of other new stuff too, and being, pushing the envelope. The kind of stuff that Daniel likes to slide into his programs. Yeah. Sometimes I think, it's a little bit of broccoli with cheese sauce on it, but it's actually really good stuff. You start to realize, you might come in talking about Beethoven or Brahms, you end up leaving talking about this great new thing you never knew existed.
Where did you perform? Where did that group perform? Like, so are we? It's because is it analogous to like an off-Broadway kind of show?
Sort of, yeah. This was a real niche thing and a real niche audience. I always thought of us as musicians. I think we probably had more musicians and composers in our audience than most people ever get,
right?
Because they wanted to see what the friends were writing and doing.
The cool stuff. And
so we were doing small. This is 6, 7, 8, 9 musicians, something like that on stage, and we would perform at the Launchie School of Music in Cambridge, and at the Psy Performance Center, which is at Boston University. When I was with Cantata Singers, they performed at NEC's Great Hall, Jordan Hall in Boston. I did my first gig actually with Boston Music Aviva was at Symphony Hall, and we had been hired to build a string orchestra for a klezmer show with Itzhak Perlman. And my first encounter with Itzhak Perlman was, he was using a motorized scooter back then. He still does now. And he came within about this close of running over my foot backstage. And I was 2 weeks on the job, and I was more than a little nervous. And that was my introduction to like sort of the A-lister showtime.
Wow.
I settled in a little bit more after that. Boston's an easy place to do it because the talent pool is incredibly deep. Of course, it's also pretty deep here. We can talk about that in a few minutes.
Sure.
And I got to work with and meet a lot of really great influential people, and also some emerging people who weren't so big then and are now, and also a lot of people who probably deserve to be a lot better known than they are now. And I think Danny and I will be working on that a little bit in the coming seasons.
Well, it's cool that you had that full range of, hey, Symphony Hall, where the Boston Symphony plays, and also these significant halls at the universities, right? I mean,
and doing the really cool experimental stuff, and that arc would continue. So when COVID hit and we had to shut down Boston Music Aviva for health reasons for our founding music director who'd been doing it for 50 years, and just couldn't do it anymore. I was looking to get back to this community-style orchestra leadership because it's fun doing that stuff, but I missed this. I missed community concerts like the In Your Hometown concert series that we're doing right now. We're going out to parks and we're playing orchestra hits and we're playing Stars and Stripes Forever with the brass ensemble. So I ended up in Albany, where I was their director of development and marketing. They've got a great symphony there. They're actually really similar size, really similar to Erie in a lot of ways. And I was basically the deputy there.
Okay.
Doing all the fundraising and sales. And I spent 3 seasons there. They do a lot of contemporary music too. So they really push the envelope and do a lot of cool stuff. And I got to sort of train for the job I have now doing that in Albany. I got to really embrace that and learn a lot about, the bigger picture and the bigger scope of what $3 million orchestra looks like versus $500,000 organization. Mm-hmm. And I got to get run through my paces there. And of course, doing it during COVID meant I got to do a little bit of everything. We all became public health officials for a few months there. Wow. And, we all became
how long were the symphonies shut down over COVID, in general, nationwide?
Everybody handled it a little bit differently. We all became Zoom experts, right?
I was going to say, in New York, it was pretty tough as opposed to even Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
right?
we were a little stricter up there. I got to Albany after the first year. So they went dark for a little while. And then they did what a lot of orchestras did, which is they were trying to figure out how to do the next thing. So before I got there, they started with 8 instruments on a stage, 6 feet apart from one another, plexiglass between them, lots of microphones, and then doing it on video, right? And they made it work. And they did these octets. And then it was 12. And then it was 16. And then by the end of that season, it was everybody wearing masks. It's kind of funny now to think back about it, but we got horn players with a mask with a little slit in it, and they're putting their little thing through it. And they
kind of doesn't work.
And the flutes having these bags on the end of their flutes to catch their whatever. And they were doing this all on video. And the most important for all of us was just staying in touch with our audiences. Erie did that too, of course.
They did a great
Daniel
job.
was on QLN doing stuff with them and doing video productions. the tough part for us is that people really liked that, but it doesn't replace being in the room.
Not at all.
Right? You can put on a record or an album or Spotify of great recordings of basically every great symphony and a whole lot of mediocre symphonies too, and you can experience them. Or you can tune into someone like Brian Hanna doing great orchestral programming. Listen to it in your car, in your house. You can have the best hi-fi. You can have a crummy little alarm clock like I do. And you can enjoy that. But it doesn't beat being in a hall and feeling the warmth of the crowd around you and having that communal experience. And so, as fun as video and Zoom and all that stuff was, we all needed to get back. And so when I started at Albany, one of my first jobs was writing the plan to get the audiences back into the hall.
Oh, wow.
And that was really a blast. And I mean, we're checking vaccine cards and enforcing masks and dealing with all the community upheaval that came with that. But the most important part was we were making music for people again.
And were you like full on by 2022 then?
Yeah, we came back as fast as we could.
Yeah.
And by then we were back into getting the halls getting full again.
Wow.
And then we could get the masks off a little later.
Did the audiences come back, Bobby?
Yeah, for the most part. There's a lot of great studies out there. There's a lot of smarter people than me in this business who do a lot of the data crunching. And a lot of what they learned is, everyone thought for a year or two there, people weren't coming back because they're afraid they're going to get sick. And we found out that is not at all the reason. The people who were coming back, and the people who weren't had simply broken the habit, right? We know this. Lots of other studies outside of music have taught us this too. It's the same challenge movie theaters are seeing, right? It's the same challenge that people not wanting to go back to the office are seeing. I was hybrid for a couple of years back before it was cool. And so I was used to it when we were all sort of moving back to Zoom and all that stuff. But people appreciated the flexibility of, say, not buying tickets as early in advance. What I will say is in Erie, people came back as strong as ever. Subscriptions are about as strong as they've ever been for the Erie Phil, and they're continuing to remain that way. And that doesn't mean there's not one left for all of you out there who aren't subscribing yet. And single tickets go on sale Monday, by the way. So if you're not looking for a whole package, that's your chance to jump in. But the communities that have the best relationships with their orchestras came back the fastest and the strongest. We are blessed to have that in Albany, and we're incredibly blessed to have that here in Erie, too.
We're talking to Bobby Pape. He is the new executive director of the Erie Philharmonic, learning his story and learning a bit about the business end of a huge and most beloved asset of our community, and that's the Erie Philharmonic. Back in just 2 minutes. Probably should be playing Beethoven or Brahms, but we're playing Huey Lewis here.
There's no problem with the power of love, Joel. Don't worry about that.
This is a fantastic song. Bobby Pape is with us. He is the new executive director, 7 weeks on the job at the Erie Philharmonic. And so they did a national search, I guess, huh?
They did indeed.
For the Phil, looking for a new ED. Steve Weiser went over to the Erie Community Foundation, and now he's in development. How much of this gig that you have that is development?
I mean, everything's development, isn't it?
I guess
in our business and otherwise. When I was in Albany, I had the great experience to be the director of development and marketing. And the reason that we looked at it that way is because it's about relationships, isn't it?
Yeah.
I can tell you the dollars and cents. There are some canned lines that are really easy, and they're sort of universal truths in the orchestra business. Ticket sales only cover a fraction of our operations. That's a standard thing. And for the industry average, it's about a third, 35 to 40%. Is covered by ticket sales. If you have a robust pop series like we do, maybe a little bit more. But philanthropy and support and investment in this kind of programming, in this kind of community building, is the grand largest thrust of what we can do and how we're able to do it. And of course, this city's been supporting an orchestra for over 100 years, so everybody here knows that already. But development is key, and it's not just the dollars. It's folks buying in. We could go into a whole tangent about economic development, and you may have seen a few years ago the Erie Phil here put out a great economic impact report.
Right.
Investing $1 in a philharmonic like ours nets well over $1 back in the regional economy. And so when I'm talking to donors and we're talking about development, we are talking about charity. But we're also talking about creating a community where people want to live, work, and play. And you had Gus on in the last hour. Gus and I have had that conversation a couple of times already. I've talked to a lot of our economic development folks here. I wanted them high on my call sheet as a new guy here in town because that's how I want our fellow business leaders to look at our business. And even though it's a 501c3, it's still bringing an economic engine to us. We're a cornerstone of the programming at the Warner, of course. We also love to see when the Warner has rock shows and country shows and comedians, and they're making money on that. I wouldn't be mad if our patrons bought that extra glass of wine or an extra little something while they're there to help Erie events out a little bit more. But yeah, at the end of the day, however the income comes in, it's an investment in what we do. And a lot of it is fundraising and a lot of it is sales.
Yeah. I love how you say it's this connection with your audience, and something has happened. Somehow the secret sauce has really come together in Erie to the point that a lot of those moments where it was hand to mouth have gone away, and we really have built this solid foundation for the Philharmonic and for much of our arts here in Erie. We're once again punching above our weight. Bobby Pape is with us. We'll got to go to take the news break here at the bottom of the hour. It's Talk Erie. You're tuned to Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show. We're live from our Kingdom Financial Group studio here at Fifth and State, also live at on YouTube and on Facebook. We're talking to the brand new executive director of the Erie Philharmonic, Bobby Pape. He is a versatile nonprofit arts executive, more than 15 years of experience, and he's a Great Lakes kind of a guy here. And I always pay homage to, let's just face it, the rich people from 100 years ago.
Yeah.
That actually said, you know what, let's build some legacies here. They started I think it was the Ladies Art Society. I'm sure I've got that wrong. But like those are the people that bought the Hassam and built our art collection. They're the ones that started the Erie Philharmonic, started the Erie Playhouse. I mean, think about this. And here we are receiving the benefits of that all these years. You know?
Yeah, and we're looking for the ways that translates to life today, right? We have these conversations a lot, actually, because a lot of these organizations through the years have had a lot of the vestiges of upper-class wealth from the past, right? And we were talking about this offline, too, about architecture and homes and things. The world has become a lot more small d democratic in the way we manage those things, right? So we have fewer multi-million-dollar donors, scaled for dollars in today's dollars. But we have a whole lot more $100 and $1,000 donors and supporters and things like that. And I'm okay with that because I think that, we live in a world where the democratization of art is an important part of what we do. It also helps us be a lot more representative of our greater cultural community. We look at things like the demographics of our region and trying to work hard to make sure that the music we put on stage is at least as best as we can in balance with the folks who are receiving it and serving our community that way. And that's something that we're going to be continuing to do. We talk a lot about what we're doing on stage at the Warner. That doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of what we're doing in schools and in the community. There's, the junior Phil and the chorus and our incredible education and engagement. We've got a heck of a team doing that at the Phil. And that's another place where we talk about, ticket sales not covering everything. Well, we're not charging the school kids.
Right. Yeah.
And we're not charging where we're going out to the parks, although a lot of those are sponsored by, at least in part, some great individuals out in those communities. And I'd love to see us do even more of that. But we've really gone in a cultural sense. And this is, you can watch things like Downton Abbey and the other, which was filmed in Troy, New York, where I used to do concerts when I was at the Albany Symphony, the one that's set in the U.S. there.
Yeah.
Those were grand days and also not great for a lot of people. Now we're figuring out what that looks like in a world where a lot of us are normal people, right? We want to go to the concert on Saturday night because we want to go hear Mahler's Sixth in November, but we also want to go hear the music of Billy Joel 2 weeks earlier. We want to wear jeans. We want to drink beer. We want to hang out. And, I often talk to people and they say, yeah, I orchestra's cool. I played in high school, but I don't know. I don't know anything about that. I say, you don't have to know anything about it. You have to be a musicologist. I didn't play, in orchestras my whole life. You can come in, have a drink. We would like you to put the lid on your sippy cup for the sake of the Warner and the beautiful renovations in there, but you can take your drink in with that, thanks to Gus and the folks over there. And you can just sort of close your eyes and let it wash over you. You don't have to be an expert to enjoy it. You don't have to be an expert in how to make a movie to enjoy a good movie. You can just sit there and watch it. And that's, that's that broader outreach that we're doing now and bringing people in. And boy, is it working here, right? We were talking about this. Thanks to Daniel Meyer and these incredible musicians we've got here. Look at the crowds that we're drawing to the Warner. And it's for everybody. So we don't have that grand class of folks showing up in their tuxedos and writing those big checks anymore like we used to. But we've got a barn raising now in the best possible way. And I'm really proud of that here and getting to do that kind of work here.
I want to talk about some of your specific passions. And it says in your bio that you even told us you're really committed to American music. And where is that at? Like what? Like for somebody that's totally uninitiated.
Sure.
I mean, I know Copeland, right?
Sure.
I know Bernstein, but that's about it. You know.
Well, what a great place to start, right? With people like Copeland and Bernstein. You're talking about a couple of 20th century masters, right? We think about Aaron Copland. We're doing Copland this year. We're doing Rodeo, and that's the hoedown. That's where's the beef, right? People are going to come in and of a certain age and up. That's what they're going to hear when they come in.
Like your head will explode when you hear a live orchestra do the "Where's the Beef" song.
Exactly, and you're also going to, and I think about, I've done a lot of summer concerts where we've run out Appalachian Spring too. This is sort of the core of 20th century American music. Now, what's happening with 21st century American music? Let's talk about John Williams. We
Yes.
have one of America's most notable composers of the 20th century writing surprisingly difficult music to play. And you talk to our brass players, Ken Heinlein, our principal tuba, who's been leading our summer concerts. He was a soloist with our orchestra concerts, and he was conducting our brass choir this week, excuse me. He'll tell you, he'll come out and say, I love John Williams, but if we're doing Close Encounters of the Third Mind, I need to start practice now because those parts are hard.
A lot of syncopation.
A lot of difficult technique, a lot of challenging things. And we don't think about symphonic music as film music, but sure it is. I mean, we're talking about from composers, going back almost 100 years now, heading to the West Coast, especially a lot of the Jewish composers who weren't being able to find work in other places back then, coming out and starting to write this incredible movie music and creating these experiences where the cutting edge of American symphonic writing and the orchestral writing in the broadest sense was happening for movies. You see places like the Warner, these old movie theaters that, were designed to have accompanying organ music. And we could do a whole nother hour on that sometime as we talk about trying to get the organ back into the Warner.
Right.
These are the things that make American music American. I mean, they were doing this in Europe too, but we don't have the history in time.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about Bach and Beethoven and Brahms and all these great composers from back then.
I mean,
America
I think
wasn't
about
America
Tchaikovsky falling in love with the United States,
Yeah.
But he was still a Russian composer, right?
Yeah, but there's wiggle room there. We've got this program with Rachmaninoff on it coming up in the fall. But it's got a huge American influence on it. You see a lot of these composers from the 20th century would come to America and then have these great experiences here. New World Symphony is, about coming here. We have a piece by Walker, the lyric for strings. It was the first black composer to win the Pulitzer Prize in Music. He's an American. That Copeland program at the end of January is really a love letter to American music, actually.
Very cool.
The whole thing, it's got a Barber violin concerto on it as well, and a newer piece. I believe a Jessie Montgomery piece on that. And she's a living composer today. She's one of the people who's sort of leading the charge of, she's probably like me. She's probably what we'd call an elder millennial or something like that at this point. But, this is still happening now. And earlier in my career, I had a lot of time to get to commission living composers, which is terrifying, by the way, because you're giving them money and time and saying, boy, I hope it's good when it comes back. And sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. But that's part of the experiment of America, right, is figuring out what works and what's different. Europe's really good at this. They've been doing this for hundreds and hundreds of years before we existed. And they did it with the church hiring composers to write for Mass every Sunday. And that's where a lot of those great, Verdi's Requiem, Mozart's, all these big composers wrote these big things for the church. Some of them because they believed in the religion, some of them because they were subversive and they were taking the church's money and then thumbing their noses at them, hidden in the music. And the American version of that, again, much more democratic, is our American students coming up through music and hopefully through programs like what we do with our Junior Phil and through our community and school engagement, finding their footing there and then getting to places where they can start to learn and write and grow. I'm following composers I commissioned when they were teenagers 10 years ago, and they've made their way through conservatory now, and they're making their way into the world. Not all of them stay in composition, just like we don't all keep playing our instruments after high school. But the ones who do are great. They're doing good work. They're learning. They're growing. And a lot of them, like me, who maybe played viola for 2 months, are finding that its music appreciation has grown out of that. We don't have to be a musician to love music.
How about on the performance side? Are there, and you're mentioning kids that are writing, but our population is shrinking. We're barely making the replacement rate on the birth rate. Yeah. Are there enough young people that say, I am going to be the best mellophone player, or tuba player, or a viola?
The kids are there. We just have to reach them. And that's why what we do before we get to the stage is so important. We have to continue fostering these opportunities for kids, because every kid can do that. Every kid can have that dream. We don't all make it. I often tell people, and I, especially with my younger staff in the office, I'll remind them, I understand that when you're in kindergarten and the teacher says, what do you want to be when you grow up? Nobody says, I want to be a development assistant for a mid-sized regional orchestra. That's just not one of those things. We find our footing and we find the nuance of it as we go. But every kid has that opportunity, and we'll find them if we give them the chances to do it. We know this in sports, right? kids don't just show up on the varsity team. They start playing t-ball or they start playing Pop Warner. They make their way up to that level, and that's why we got to start early. I was joking earlier. I've often said I'll give a TED Talk one of these days called "The Kids Aren't the Future." That's a sales and marketing joke of mine. We love kids and we love programming them, but when we talk to donors and patrons and say, we got to get the kids in the concert, I said, they'll come. We're getting there. We're going to reach them where they are first. Then we're going to work on their parents. We're going to get their parents to come into the concerts, because if the parents are fostering a love for music at home, the kids will follow.
Yeah.
And it's a wraparound services situation, right? It's the same way we think about community building. It's the same way we tackle home insecurity. It's the same way we tackle health and wellness. We have to remember that music isn't just getting kids into the Warner. It's about going to the kids. And it's not just kids, actually. It's the same thing with the broader community. Sure. We can do a lot in the Warner. We also have to go to them. So our next star tuba player, and the current principal tuba of the New York Phil is from Erie.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. These players do emerge from these places, and they will continue to, as long as we continue to foster it at every level.
So there's a guy from Erie that's playing at Lincoln Center on a regular basis.
Yeah, not just any old player either. Yeah.
He's the lead.
Yeah.
He leads the group.
And he's been back here. He's done activities with us. He's done activities in schools with us. And I keep saying, our current principal tuba, Ken, who I mentioned earlier, is also a star. And I keep saying, I want to get him back so we can do dueling tubas one of these years.
And that's the equivalent is our Isaac Matson, pitching for the Pittsburgh Pirates, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's playing in the majors.
That's exactly it. And that's it. That's the majors, right? And where is Erie Phil on that scale? Well, we're pretty darn good for what we are here.
We're pretty good Double-A team, right?
We're talking about this off the air. I'm not. I don't want to insult any of my colleagues at orchestras of this size in other cities around the country, but we are in a really lucky situation, and we're out kicking our coverage a little bit. I would put it in sports terms.
Yeah.
We have the luck of being able to draw from incredible regional talent from people who trained at CIM in Cleveland, people who are in Rochester, in Buffalo with these great music programs coming from Fredonia. We were talking about in the olden days, we might get some Fredonia students in the orchestra.
Yeah.
Now we get the Fredonia faculty in the orchestra. Wow. And musicians want to play here because we're really good, and that makes us that much better. That's because of Daniel. That's because of the players and the programming and this community supporting it. Mm-hmm. And you know what? The other thing musicians love? They love full houses. You come to a city like Erie, we pack the house. You feel good after. You'd want to play here. It's just, I'm sure it's why more people would like to play for the great baseball teams, the great football teams too. And I say this as a long-suffering Bills and Sabres fan.
Talk about this, because you have a full. I'm looking at the symphonic series and the pop series. Again, you have major sponsors of them, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 11 performances between September in May.
Yeah, we've got 5 on each side, actually, 5 pop, 5 symphonic, but also beyond that, we've got our annual Messiah tradition. So that makes 11 with the chorus.
Yeah.
This orchestra, and it's yet another reason I was so eager to come here and work with this orchestra after that search, has dialed in the something for everyone approach to music. And there are, let's just say, snobbier folks out there who might feel like that's not living up to the standards of a symphony orchestra. And I would say to them, if it's getting folks in and they're having a good night and we're getting to play music for them, I think that's great. You mentioned Dizzy Gillespie earlier.
Yeah.
Talk about another American,
icon, right?
Yeah, of the 20th century. And those lines get blurrier and blurrier. Earlier in my career, when I was working at Buffalo Phil, we were recording a bunch of Duke Ellington stuff, and Ellington wrote great symphonic music in addition to all the jazz standards we know. And what is jazz and what is, let's say, small C classical or orchestral music? Well, they're pretty darn close when you get closer to it. I often remind people, we just hit the centennial for Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue. Everyone knows Rhapsody in Blue, even if only from the old United commercials. And Rhapsody in Blue was premiered in New York at Aeolian Hall in the early 30s, in the early 20s, on a concert of contemporary music. And that's the way it was built, because it was a world premiere of all this weird new music. It's my kind of stuff. It speaks to my heart. And you know what? Most of it was terrible. You would not want to recreate that concert because you would be bored out of your mind for the other hour of it. But that gem came out of it. And that's the hunt of finding the great new music. Now, if you look at our season coming up and you look at I'm going to say the sponsors, the Haynes Erie Pop Series.
Yeah.
And you look at the concert in November, the music of Billy Joel starring Michael Cavanaugh. Now, Michael Cavanaugh debuted the leading role in Moving Out, the Billy Joel jukebox musical on Broadway. And he was handpicked by Billy Joel to do that. And he's been touring it ever since. Billy Joel has a greatest hits album, and I know because I own it. It's 3 CDs, right? Because there's no shortage of Billy Joel hits. If you started naming them off, we could do a little karaoke here and do about 20 of them before we run out, right? How many B-sides are there? Probably hundreds,
right?
That have all faded away with time.
Sure.
Well, that's the joy of exploration, and that's why I love supporting contemporary music and new works, because you get a whole album of Billy Joel. You know, you listen to Turnstiles. There's several hits on Turnstiles.
Yes.
But there's also some songs that, you probably might not hear again on the radio, and that's okay too. Mm-hmm. That's the triage that we're doing in real time with composers. We do it all the time with pop music. Why not do it with symphonic music too? Now, we're curatorial in the way we program, so you're getting all the hits here. Mm-hmm. We're doing the music of John Williams. John Williams has written a lot of great movie music. We're handpicking those hits for you. Daniel's doing that curatorial work for you. Come Home for the Holidays is next up in that in December, of course, and that's a family tradition here.
Right.
And that's always a blast. We've got a great soloist coming back.
You always
for
have to have Sleigh Ride at the end, right?
Yeah, I mean, what would it be without the giant clap of the, that's a great spot. The bigger that is, the better.
Right.
And then we could come back to film music and more John Williams. Wow. How do you not do Raiders of the Lost Ark? And I know we've done a lot of the Star Wars stuff too, because again, John Williams here is, again, he's really the 20th century champion of American music in a lot of ways. I grew up on those Indiana Jones movies, and if they come on TV in our house, they're whatever they are, that's it. That's what we're watching. Doesn't matter where they are in them. Maybe not the second one, the first and the third one for sure. I'm so excited for that. And I want people to bring their kids and families, and I want them to have candy and popcorn and hang out and and enjoy it.
And people should understand, it's not like they can just go and grab an old VCR tape of Raiders and play it. There's a significant licensing that has to happen for a public performance of the movie.
It is one of the most expensive concerts we do.
I'm sure it is.
But it's also one of the most fulfilling, right? Because you're reaching an audience that, how do you not love that movie, right? I don't think
and they have to pull from the soundtrack all the background music and just have the talking.
So we play it live, and Daniel and our percussionist and a couple other key players actually have a track in their ear when they're playing it, so they can make sure that they're staying in time with the film. The nice thing with orchestral music on its own is you can breathe, you can give and take a little, you can take a little slower, a little faster. You can't do that when you're going to the film because you got to hit. You got to hit when the gunshots hit. You got to hit when the big explosions hit. You can't miss those things. So they're right on it, and they are nailing it. It's actually impressively hard to do, and our orchestra is very good at it because Daniel's very good at it. And then, at the end of that series, just to round out the pop side, Ashley Brown, who originated the role of Mary Poppins on Broadway, is coming, and she's doing a bunch of Broadway hits and Disney hits and sort of, these incredible show tunes and family favorites. And, it's sort of a cabaret night style show. And she's really just a superstar. I won't call her a diva because she's much more humble than that, but she's got that energy. And that's really exciting. But that shouldn't scare people off from the symphonic series too. And Lincoln Recycling helps make that possible. You're going to see a lot of familiar composer names down that list: Bach, Beethoven, Rachmaninoff. You're going to get a lot of really good stuff there. We've got a lot of star soloists, and they're not going to be household names all the time because, we could bring them, but they're really expensive. We can't, they're not all going to be Yo-Yo Ma and Itzhak Perlman and Emmanuel Axe. But these players, our team has gone out and found, some of them are established, but they're very good at very specific things. Some of them are emerging talents. We're going to get them first here. Think about what the Seawolves do, right? You're going to get some of these guys who you're going to see come in today, and then you're going to see them tomorrow. Or you're going to see someone like Orly Shaham comes in, who is this sister of Gil Shaham, who's been here before too, and he's also a famous soloist. Orly is a Mozartian specialist. So she's coming in and she's doing Mozart Concerto number 20 in this season. Orly is one of those people who is as much an academic as an instrumentalist. She's a stellar pianist, but she is also like the most authentic, most intense Mozart pro today playing piano. And we're getting that kind of world-class expertise here in Erie because those are the folks we seek out on that series.
Bobby, I just got about a minute.
Sure.
And I want to talk about, again, making it more accessible. And we talked about getting into the schools and things. One of the things that we've noticed about the concept of public art and performance art is everyone is invited. Everyone should attend. And so talk about some of the places that you guys are performing this summer that are like totally free. And all that stuff.
We were just out in Carroll Gardens in Edinburgh last night.
Okay.
We were out in Northeast the night before that. And we're going to be back out in Northeast next on Wednesday, August 6th. We're off next week, and then we're back the following for one more concert. That concert in Northeast, the finale out there, is actually really special because it's an octet from the orchestra. So you're going to see 8 players up close. You're also going to see a junior fill quartet getting their opportunity to experience playing in front of a big crowd. And you're going to get some of our choirsters singing a chamber music program with our incredible music director for the chorus, Thomas Brooks. So that's kind of a little bit of everything grab bag concert. And again, our great sponsors out there are selling beer and wine in the park. So have yourself, and I told them when I was out there Wednesday night, I had a Labatt Blue in my hand when I went up to do the final announcements because I support the people who support the Phil, especially when they're selling beer. And that's the exact attitude I want everyone to have about the Phil. If you haven't been to the Warner in a while to come see us, please do. And come for a movie, come for John Williams, or grab any of these classic series, the symphonic series concerts. I don't care if you don't know anything about them. Trust us, trust Daniel in having built these programs. You're going to like it even if you don't know it yet because we've made sure that it's something you're going to enjoy.
Fantastic. Bobby Pape. Again, we welcome you here. It sounds like the synergy is going to be fabulous of your passions, your capabilities, and where Erie is at, where we are with the Philharmonic and where we are with our community.
We'll take another hour sometime to talk about this incredible development downtown and how we want to be a part of it here, continue to be a part of it.
Wow. Fantastic. Again, we appreciate you taking the time. It is 4 minutes in front of 5 o'clock.